And I've been wiping Paul Theron's tears with regards to the Chinese downward revision of the growth to 7.5%. Please tell us how you feel, because this could actually hamper this whole optimistic view that you have of the global, bull market that we have.
No, look, if it goes any lower, it'll almost be negative. 7.5% growth. It's so terrible. Look, we know what the Chinese government's been doing.
Tell me what you think is a hard landing and what you think is a soft landing in China.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, a landing, right? A landing is when an airplane is like this, right? And it actually touches the ground, which would mean Chinese growth going to zero. So in my opinion,
so as long as it's not near zero, you're fine.
Exactly.
Because some would argue that a hard landing is at 6%, Paul.
No, hard landing is when, the landing gear doesn't come out. And then you hit the tarmac and you do structural damage. What we're experiencing here is an enormous economy, the world's second largest, cooling down a little bit because they're not investing at the same rate that they have been in unnecessary infrastructure. So it seems eminently sensible to me. And we know also that the number is becoming progressively much more balanced than it was a decade ago.
So you're happy with 7.5%. At what level would you be worried?
Well, I mean,
know it's difficult for you to worry, but
look, the people have been selling off the commodity stocks, which again looks to me like just crazy, because the volumes that they're digging out of the ground and the prices at which they're doing it are at record levels. So physical volumes of oil and iron ore and all that stuff. And the prices, we know what's happening with oil, and the same thing's happening with the rest of the commodity complex. So what me worry,
Never. So let's touch on Russia. I know you focus on this economy. So Vladimir Putin winning a third term as president, 99.3% of the votes counted. Putin leading with around 64%. Gennady Zyuganov with 17.2%.
Excellent.
Mikhail Prokhorov with 7.8%. And Vladimir Zhirikovsky with 6.2%.
Well done.
Thank you so much.
Russian
I've been practicing all day. But again, Putin winning third.
Yes, look, exit polls had been indicating that Putin was very popular with people who didn't want to get locked up, okay? So what I mean by that is everybody was expected to vote for him because he's the strong man, and for some reason or another, being a strong man is popular in Russia. His results in the areas outside of St. Petersburg and outside of Moscow were very strong. Again, I don't really know what that means, but his competition, the guy who came second, was the communist. He's the one who wants things to go back to the way they were in 1917. The guy Prokhorov, who came third, is an oil and nickel oligarch who had more money than you can imagine. But I guess the final conclusion here is that it's business as usual, which means difficult. And it also means potentially issues with gas supply to Europe and so on and so forth. But the Russians, they are in a world of their own. They are the world's greatest nation, according to themselves. And so I think we can see a continuation of, the way things have been from Putin. It looks as though he's going to serve 2 terms, then the other guy will take a term, then he'll come back for another 2. So we're going to have Putin until 2042.
All nations think that they're the best nation in the world, depending on who they are. So let's not
I'm not sure about South Africa. I sometimes think we're the worst nation in the world, and yet we are actually one of the
What's interesting is that in Russia we're going to see immense spending coming through on education and on various other industries that could actually spur growth quite extensively.
And the military, of course.
And the military, indeed. Do you think that this is a likely scenario that could actually spill over into the Eurozone? Because it seems that France might actually be teetering on this. Do you think that's a possibility?
Teetering on what? On spending more on its military?
Spending more across the board.
Look, the Russians are in a very favorable position because, of course, it's an oil and gas-based economy. So, they're in the pound seats. You can't tell them anything. They're doing well. They can call it as they see it. It's a little bit of a one-dimensional economy. But, what can you say? They have the world's largest supplies of gas, and they are the world's largest exporter of crude oil.
Would you invest in Russian companies?
As a rule, no. And that's principally because if you've seen what happened with BP's involvement there, it's just a very difficult environment in terms of regulatory changes. And it's an example of what, in fact, can happen when a country becomes rather inward and solitary-minded and just decides to change the rules from one day to the next. So, a resounding no.
So, let's just touch on the BP story.
Yes. Also a fascinating story with regard to current, corporate dilemmas. This is the settlement, or part of the settlement, with regard to the massive Macondo spill in the Gulf of Mexico. So They put aside an enormous sum of money, somewhere in the region of $40 billion to cover them for potential liabilities. This is a partial settlement. Understand that it's only with the private parties, like the guys who run shrimp trawlers out of the coast, and people who had tourism-related businesses which suffered. This is not a settlement with the government, and it's only a partial settlement with regard to the disbursements that have happened already. The market is taking it as fairly positive with regard to BP, and the BP stock price is up. But to put it in perspective, BP took some heavy pain through that thing and isn't yet back at its all-time highs, unlike some of its competitors.
So is it offering value right now?
Well, we've got a couple of clients who bought them way down low because they thought the settlements would end up being less than anticipated, and they've made quite good gains. But they're in that twilight zone now where you've got to decide, do you stick with this thing or do you exit now? Because you could still see some nasty surprises in the settlement. So for those people that are kind of trading BP because it's undervalued given the quantum of the liabilities, I don't know, I think that's getting very long in the tooth.
Okay, so
now.
let's touch on this oil price, Paul, 124.
Well, you know, with all of
barrel.
this stuff, you know, I mean, as we're saying, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by the demand side, and I'm also not surprised with the saber rattling in Iran and the Russians and all the rest of it, that it's at these levels. You know, and what you know they say about oil is they're not making any new oil. It's just the old stuff that we keep reusing.
Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us. Great to have you on the program.